I'd like to speak of the Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor.
Should this have been done before Sindoor took place? Pakistani obstructionism made it very difficult. And then the terrorists discovered there was a perfect place to plant bombs.
Making racism against Indians seem more acceptable than other forms.
I think it's important that we draw a distinction between criticism and prejudice.
What can India learn from Thailand and Thailand from India?
Thailand itself can teach us so much about tourism, and I think India is looking for opportunities.
India has extraordinary soft power.
There isn't even a small town in America without a yoga class somewhere. We had Mr. Trump imposing these tariffs on India. I'm afraid that many students aren't reading the full book anymore. They're asking AI to tell them what the gist is, what are the key takeaways.
Hello, Namaste, Sawadee Khap. Welcome to IndoThaiNews. Today with us we have Dr. Shashi Tharoor, former Under Secretary General of the United Nations, four-time Member of Parliament from Thiruvananthapuram and the Chairman of Parliament's Standing Committee on External Affairs and author of more than 25 books. Dr. Tharoor, welcome to Bangkok. Before we dive in, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Dinesh Agaskar, Executive Director of Business and Legal Affairs at India-Thai Chamber of Commerce, whose efforts made this conversation possible, as well as the ITCC for their continued effort strengthening our community here in Thailand. Mr. Agaskar, what inspired you to bring Dr. Tharoor to Bangkok?
Namaskar, Sawadee Khap. Thank you for having me here. Well, to answer your question, Dr. Tharoor is one of those individuals in India who is at the intersection of global diplomacy, parliamentary leadership, and talent or public intellectualism. So, and as a chairperson of the External or Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs, I think he is at the very heart of what India is thinking about the entire world, specifically, including Southeast Asia and Thailand too. So, and as for ITCC, which is over 80 plus years working on bridging between India and Thailand, I think Dr. Tharoor is a natural fit. We wanted rather someone specifically who is not only speaking to our members only on trade and commerce, but more on a strategic vision of what India brings out. So I think there is no other person better than Dr. Tharoor himself.
Dr. Tharoor, and from your side?
Well, first of all, these guys, the Indo-Thai Chamber of Commerce, invited me. And it seemed to me, it was a long pending invitation, but this time seemed the right time for me to come. Also because of the fact that the relationship with Thailand seems to be growing stronger by the day. As you know, last year we elevated the relationship between India and Thailand to a strategic partnership, which means something. And what that means is something I was curious to find more about. So that seemed to me a good moment to accept this invitation. Also, the elections in my home state, where I was very involved in campaigning and so on, got finished. We got a good result. My party won. So I'm now in a more relaxed and celebratory mood than during the tension of the election process. So all of that.
That's great, sir. That leads us to our first question. India and Thailand share deep civilizational ties. Ramayana, Buddhism, trade routes centuries old. But in the present day, beyond the nostalgia, what is the substance of the India-Thai relationship? What can India learn from Thailand and Thailand from India?
Well, look, first of all, you're right about the cultural thing, and I think there's no point disregarding that, because that goes to the heart. I mean, even the old name of Thailand, Siam, comes from Sanskrit, Sharmadesha. It is something which we keep realizing when the old ancient capital of Ayodhya is actually comes from Ayodhya, that the kings are all called Rama even today. Rama the 12th, I think, or the 13th is the current one. All of them is a Rama. All of this, the names, the cultural origins, the traditions, rituals, practices. I'm told that to this day, there's always a Brahmin priest present at the coronation. So you've got all of this cultural connection, which simply cannot be gainsaid or ignored. In addition to that, there's a new dimension. We mentioned the strategic partnership. And that means that we now have to think in terms of a lot of things. Trade is obviously a factor, but there India is on the disadvantaged end, because I think of the 16 billion or so we have in trade, something like more than 11.5 comes in exports from Thailand to India, and India has not been able to hold its own to more than 4 billion back. And I think India is looking for opportunities to expand its presence in the Thai market. Equally, I know that we could get more Thais coming to India as tourists. There's much less happening than should happen. There's something on the Buddhist circuit to Gaya and so on, but that seems to be about it. And given that Thailand itself can teach us so much about tourism, one of the things we ought to do, I think, is to strengthen that relationship a bit more. Then there are questions of maritime security. You know that there's a BIMSTEC organization which has been beefed up, as it were, ever since we started seeing not much prospect in the SAARC organization, which used to cover the entire subcontinent, but Pakistani obstructionism made it very difficult to function in that context. And so India has been giving more and more importance to BIMSTEC, which also adds Myanmar and Thailand and focuses more on the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean side of things rather than on the western side where Pakistan, Afghanistan and Maldives are part of SAARC. Now, all those are important factors. There are lots of modern new things, cybersecurity, digital cooperation. I think when one can go through a list, in fact, I was going through some basic things that we can do here. We can certainly learn from Thailand's efficiency in manufacturing, in tourism management, in urban infrastructure, because Bangkok has improved dramatically. I first came here 45 years ago, or more than that, 47 years ago. And honestly, the traffic was unbearable, and the slightest rain meant the streets were flooded. That seems to have changed. The flooding, I'm told, is now a matter of history. It doesn't happen anymore. And the highways, the flyovers and bypasses, all of that are very visible here. They haven't resolved the problem of traffic, but they've certainly eased it by comparison. I think we could also learn from that. Food processing and export-oriented industrial development that you have, we certainly could learn from. India should have a lot that we could do in partnership here. Then, as far as the Indian strengths are for Thailand, I would argue the digital public infrastructure we built up is truly world class. You know, we have created, for example, this what we call the Jan Dhan, the Aadhaar, and the mobile culture, JAM. And the Aadhaar is this unique identification thing, as a result of which, in a country of 1.4 billion people, everyone has a numeric biometric identity that they can present to the authorities. Similarly, you've got the UPI, the United Payments Interface, which is one of the best and most modern techniques for getting money directly from one bank account to another. They say it's swifter than SWIFT, the American thing, which was the world standard till now. Yeah. And 19 countries have adopted it, and more are going on. That's something which I think Thailand could learn from. We have a lot of expertise in software and now increasing AI capability. Our science, technology, engineering, and medicine, the STEM subjects, we produce more graduates in any of those subjects than any country in the world. And Thailand could certainly benefit from that as well. Our innovation ecosystems and large-scale entrepreneurship are really growing now, with a lot of encouragement as well from the government and the systems. So I do believe that technology-led growth is something all of us have to do more and more of. And that's where Thailand and India could collaborate more. I see these as areas where Thailand can actually benefit from associating with India.
So, as we're on the topic of culture, India has extraordinary soft power. Cinema, cuisine, yoga, spirituality, but it often struggles to translate that into genuine international influence. And even when something like yoga does gain influence, I feel India is left behind and out of the picture. Why do you think this gap exists?
Well, I'm not sure the gap is entirely a fair word, because when you think about the fact there isn't even a small town in America without a yoga class somewhere, then I think you realize that there's been a deep, wide and pervasive influence that is being underestimated in your question. But I would argue that one of the strengths of India is that its soft power, its culture, spreads more slowly but more enduringly and more widely than something that may go viral like a K-pop wave or something. I know that K-pop is also horrendously popular in India, as well as in various other parts of the world, and that's great. I admire the Koreans for it. But the truth is that how long that will last, whether it will survive this generation, whether it's something which has that kind of global impact. I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to diss it. I'm just saying that I suspect that the things like yoga and even the appeal of Bollywood will be around for a heck of a long time. Now, what happens with something like Bollywood is, you may find that there'll be sort of 8 or 9 films that have a modest impact, and suddenly one thing goes viral. I mean, I don't know if you read, for example, that the single most popular film in China in 2005 was Three Idiots. Now, you can imagine there's nothing in connection. It's completely an Indian story and done that way. But the Chinese was, I think, because of their also exam culture and studying and intense university thing, something related to it. And it became a huge hit. So you will have the ability. Now, if you had asked this question at that time, people said, what you're talking about, look at Three Idiots. Today, there is no comparable recent example, though I believe a few years later, Dangal also was hugely popular in China. But I'm just saying that you can see that extending. Yoga has definitely spread everywhere. Indian restaurants. I remember when I went to study in America in 1975, there was one Indian restaurant in the whole of New England. It was a rather modest and mediocre one called the India Restaurant. Today, you can't, you'll find one on every street corner in New England practically. I'm exaggerating, but not by much. I remember even 20 years later, I was testifying for the UN in the small German town of Karlsruhe, which is where their constitutional court sits. And the government was very happy with my testimony, and so they said, we want to treat you to your favorite meal. I said, well, you have any Indian food in Karlsruhe? I didn't expect to. To my surprise, there was one Indian restaurant even there. So that's the kind of spread that you've got there. I remember going to some really obscure little town in Victoria in Australia, sort of one street town kind of thing, one horse town, as the Americans would say. And the only restaurant there was an Indian one. So I think that you shouldn't underestimate the deep, pervasive, and enduring impact of Indian culture and soft power. It will spread, it will stay, it will last. I don't think these Indian restaurants are going to be shutting down in a hurry. It's a long-lasting presence. And some things will spread. For example, Ayurveda now is getting to be more and more interesting. When I was minister, I remember going to to Colombia, and the president saying to me, we'd like more Ayurvedic clinics in our country. I was totally taken aback, but I took that back with me. Similarly, in Peru, the mayor of Lima said he would love to have a Tata Nano factory. Tata sadly weren't interested, and Nano is now history. But nonetheless, I'm just saying that there are all of these possibilities, and I think it's important not to completely toss aside the influence of India. I'm not saying we can't do better. Of course, we can. We don't do things very much like promoting things actively through the government. A lot of our soft power attraction is not because of government or active efforts by the authorities. It's despite the lack of those. I mean, yoga didn't go because anyone from the government went, right? So there were individual people like B.K.S. Iyengar going to America, and lots of yoga experts who took the ideas and the practices with them, and then it caught on and spread. Or if you look at Bollywood, the government has nothing to do with it. In fact, when we had really tough relations with Afghanistan, it was the Bollywood films and soap operas on Indian TV that won the heart and minds of Afghan people for us. Correct. So let's not write off the significance of all of that. I think it's very important.
As you said, the government does not do enough to promote the soft power of India. Do you also feel it fails to maintain a positive global image of India? In recent years, there has been a noticeable rise in anti-Indian rhetoric online. What's striking is that this often gets dismissed as humor or deserved criticism, making racism against Indians seem more acceptable than other forms. As someone who has spoken extensively about India's global image, where does this come from?
Okay, let me start off first by reacting to the premise of your question. I didn't say the government doesn't do enough to promote it. What I said is the government doesn't do much to promote it because, in fact, government propaganda never goes very well anywhere. I think it's important that we let these cultural things thrive by themselves. Where the government can promote, it should, but that's not going to be the principal vehicle. After all, American soft power came from Levi's and McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Disney. They didn't really come from any government efforts. So there is the Voice of America, there is the Fulbright scholarships, there's all the American government efforts also. But they are relatively minor by comparison with what the world is attracted to in America. And similarly with India. I just want to stress that I'm not blaming the government for not doing enough. I don't want them to do too much, because people can see government propaganda for what it is. They really want to be attracted to something by itself. But now coming to your second question, I think it's important that we draw a distinction between criticism and prejudice. So criticism is legitimate. I think every country, every people, every culture, and every government in a democracy must be prepared for criticism and must be prepared to live with it, and if where appropriate, respond in a constructive way. But criticism is something we can all take. And so I know something was going around WhatsApp yesterday about how dirty India is. I mean, let's face it, there are things we can do to improve that. Even the Prime Minister launched a Swachh Bharat campaign, a Clean Up India campaign, and arguably we still haven't become as clean as we should be. And some of our neighboring countries do a better job than we do. Why? We need to get those systems right. There were good and bad reasons. I remember one example was that at one point early on in the cleanup in the 90s, we were trying to put, they did pass a policy that there would be a huge concrete, so therefore unstealable, dustbin on every corner of every street. And then the terrorists discovered that it was a perfect place to plant bombs, so they stopped doing the dustbins. I mean, it's a genuine problem that you have in a country where there are neighbors who are trying to dispatch terrorists against you. But we have to find other kinds of solutions, as other countries have been able to do. On the question of prejudice, however, that is inexcusable. And prejudice and racism are real in the world. I don't think Indians are innocent either, because Indians can sometimes be prejudiced towards other peoples. And I think similarly, many people tend to be prejudiced against India. And as you said rightly, even if they disguise it as humor, there is no excuse for it and should be called out for racism or bias whenever it happens. So I'm not suggesting at all that we can excuse or condone that kind of thing. And for that, we have to stand up and say, wait a minute, this is not who we are. This is not what you can reduce us to. Sorry, this is not fun. But I think, draw a line between criticism. We are a bit of a thin-skinned nation sometimes. And that goes back, honestly, to the times when, for 200 years, we were ruled by other people. And therefore, there was a certain desire to assert ourselves, our own agency, our own autonomy. And when foreigners talk down to us, we tend to become very defensive and sometimes belligerent in our criticism back. We need to find the right balance. Accept criticism in a constructive way, reject prejudice and racism when it comes.
Speaking of our neighbors, I'd like to speak of the Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor. You stepped forward to lead India's diplomatic delegation to brief the world on India's position, traveling to the US, Belgium, Brazil, and beyond. As chairman of Parliament's Standing Committee on External Affairs and someone with deep UN diplomatic experience, how do you reflect on that moment? And what does it tell us about the role of experienced diplomats and statesmen in the time of national crisis?
Thank you for that question. I should stress I only led one of the delegations. There were multiple delegations that went to different parts of the world. There was one that came this side too. There was another one that went to the Gulf, a third one to Europe, and so on. Mine went to 4 Latin American countries and to the US. And I must say that we had a terrific time, in the sense that we got a warm reception, a constructive reception. They listened to us. They understood it was important to India what we were there to convey. And they took our message very seriously. For example, Colombia had been a country which had issued a condemnation of India when Sindoor happened. They had supported, they had expressed sympathy for the victims in Pakistan. So when I explained both in a press conference and in the private meetings with the government as to why this was wrong, they were good enough to withdraw their statement and to issue another one expressing understanding of and support for the Indian position. In many countries, we interacted with both the executive, that is the president, vice president, prime minister, foreign minister, that kind of thing, and also with parliamentarians, their chair people of foreign affairs committee, other committees, or speakers or presidents of their parliaments, and so on. And everywhere we got a tremendously good reception and tremendous understanding. I will say, however, that there are always challenges in this kind of thing. First of all, should this have been done before Sindoor took place? After Pahalgam and before Sindoor, could we have done a better job of preparing the world for the likely response by explaining why we knew who was to blame? Some people did not believe or had not believed that we had enough evidence to attack the terrorist camps in Pakistan. And I think that's something that we should have perhaps done more to prepare the ground for. And then on top of that, there is the question of each country has its own internal politics, its own internal considerations, and whether our explanation was enough to overcome some of those things. So we had a good short-term impact. Even in the US, for example, where I met every conceivable section of opinion except the president himself. I met the vice president, the senators, the congress people. I met think tanks, I met media, I met everyone you can think of across the board. And nowhere did we get any criticism or pushback. And where we got tough questions, I was able to give effective answers. So we all came back feeling we'd had a triumphant visit. And yet, sadly, what ended up happening, I'm sorry to say, was that we found a little while later, that is within a couple of months of our delegation having gone, we had Mr. Trump imposing these tariffs on India and the setback at that time in Indo-US relations. So just sending a delegation and conveying a message does not alone solve the whole problem. It's important to do it. I'm glad we did it. As I said, I wish we had done it earlier also. But even though this ability to be able to communicate is essential in all international relations, to have a personal contact, to get your message across, very important. In addition to that and beyond that, there are always other factors in a relationship that you've got to keep working on over a period of time. And though Mr. Trump is a special case, in other countries we haven't had anything like that. But still, it's important to keep hammering away at this. You ask about whether diplomacy is important. Of course it is. I mean, the nature of diplomacy has changed. I mean, diplomacy as a modern practice began in an era when communications were very slow, cumbersome, and difficult. If I sent from India an ambassador to, let's say, in those days it was Moscow or St. Petersburg, it might take a week for a letter or an instruction from me to get to him. So his own role becomes extremely important. He is the one person talking to the monarch there, the government there, the people there, etc. Today, that's simply not the case. I mean, presidents are picking up the phone and talking to prime ministers. Foreign ministers are going back and forth. There are video conferences, there are phone calls, there are frequent summits and visits. It's not uncommon for two heads of state to meet 4 times in a year if the relationship is important enough. So then the diplomat has a very different role. A lot of it is maintenance. A lot of it is doing things below the surface, opening up doors, doing sort of relationship building, exploring opportunities that later can be exploited at a higher level. So today's diplomacy is not the diplomacy of 200 years ago, but it is extremely important. And I would say the most important factor never to forget is the human contact. We're all about that. I mean, the world is increasingly going digital. AI is I mean, I suspect that many, in fact, some ambassadors have confessed to me that many of their diplomatic cables are now written by AI because, in fact, all the information they have to process, AI can do much faster than they could. A cable that might take them 2 or 3 days to write in great detail suddenly can be done in 2 or 3 minutes by AI. So that's no longer as important. What matters is who have you met, who are you friendly with, who have you established a rapport with, who have you broken bread with or had a drink with or gone out with or played a golf game with or whatever it is. Those are the things that make human contact indispensable and which no AI can ever replicate.
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah, because as being into the same arena, we are also into AI consulting. But then what we always do is always keep the HITL, human in the loop. So that's a very important point that you've sorted out. Very appreciate that.
As you speak of AI, sir, you are author of more than 25 books.
29 now.
So you out of everyone know the importance of storytelling. Do you think with the increase of AI and with the increase of short form content being more accessible and more convenient, do you feel that storytelling will lose its value, or do you think it will turn into something more concise?
Well, concision is actually a reflection of dwindling attention spans. And there is no doubt that one of the phenomena of our time is that the human ability to engage with lengthy, complex texts is dwindling. There was a study done in Europe, more than one, I think, when I read a very detailed report of a study or studies done over a period of 5 or 6 years during this digital era, which established conclusively that students' ability to read and grasp long and complex texts has come down in these last 5, 6 years. Can you imagine? So we're looking at a problem where everyone is getting material in short. They're getting WhatsApp forwards, they're getting digital summaries, they're getting AI summaries, whatever. And that's all they're reading. I mean, nowadays, I'm afraid that many students aren't reading the full book anymore. They're asking AI to tell them what the gist is, what are the key takeaways. Now that is okay for a busy working professional who just needs to know something like a headline. But for a student, that's disastrous. That's going to stunt the development of their own brains and their own thinking ability, their own ability to process complex information. So I do worry about that very, very seriously, no doubt about it. But stories, are what keeps human beings going. And I think that right throughout human civilization, anywhere in the world, the transmission of culture, the transmission of knowledge, the transmission of ideas has come through stories being told within families, around the campfires, around the public arenas. There's no doubt in my mind that this is the way in which human beings experience what other people have experienced. None of us can ever do everything that's possible in the world. But there are others who've done some things we haven't done. We've done things they haven't done. We hear each other's stories, we read each other's stories, and we learn about that. And I think that's extremely important. Of my 29 books, of my first 5 books, of my first 6 books, 4 were fiction. So I literally did nothing but tell stories. Of my 23 books since those 6, not one has been fiction, because I haven't had the time or the space in my head to invent other worlds and occupy them. But yet, in those non-fictions, I've tried to tell stories as well. I've tried to explain things in a way that will engage people. One of my most demanding scholarly kind of books is a book called The Battle of Belonging, which is a study of nationalism, patriotism, and what it means to be Indian. But I made sure that every chapter begins with a story about identity, about how identities are formed, how what people's experiences are. And that's one of the things that I think made the book more readable and not just a theoretical work.
As you speak of students, I'd like to ask for students that aspire to speak like you, to write like you, be able to articulate themselves as well. What would you suggest to them? What made you and the way you view the world? What shaped
Articulation.
Yes.
I will tell you that articulation is not just about speaking and not just about having words. First of all, it has to reflect clarity of thought. Clarity of expression comes from clarity of thought. So if you have clear thinking, if you have read enough to understand and to have a firm idea about what you're saying, then the next challenge is to find the right words to say it. To find the right words, yes, you need things like extensive reading, so you have a decent vocabulary, and you know how words are to be used. You don't use the wrong words. You should also definitely have the discipline to pursue thoughts to their logical extent. You don't just say superficial things. And then, of course, you have to listen. Anyone who just talks but doesn't listen to other people is never going to be articulate or a good communicator, because the art of communication is about exchange. It's not only one-way traffic. It's not about monologues. It's not about my man ki baat and not yours. I have to hear you so that when I say something to you, it makes sense in relationship to what you've said and to what you're thinking, to what you can relate to when you speak to me. So that's, I would say, articulation is too often confused with just being glib or using a lot of words, sounding fluent. That helps, and that comes with practice also. If you do something often enough, you'll get the fluency. But much more important is clarity of thought, of understanding, of dealing with complexity, of the discipline and the reading required to acquire the knowledge so you speak sense when you speak. All of that is extremely, extremely vital.
As we approach the end of this interview, is there something you'd like to share to the IndoThaiNews audience?
Well, I'm interested, first of all, to discover there are as many as 350,000 people of Indian origin in Thailand. I think we sometimes escape consciousness of that. I think that's important. I wish them all very well. I think they're lucky in many ways to have so much of Southeast Asia and so much of India in their heritage. Yeah. And I think that's something I congratulate them upon living, straddling these two worlds. Very, very good. I wish them luck. I hope they don't lose complete touch with the roots of their origins. I realize that some people here, I met a couple of gentlemen yesterday who were even born in Thailand. So, and they were themselves now fairly senior. So that's probably their children will be second, maybe even third generation born in Thailand, Thai citizens. But they're still conscious of their origins, because you look in the mirror and you see an Indian. You can't entirely escape that. And therefore, I think it's important to keep that dual strand alive inside their own consciousness. And I certainly hope that they will do that. We in India, I think, have a duty to help facilitate that by making it easy for you all to come, for you all to have access to your native cultures. And we too, I think, need to be more assiduous at promoting availability of everything: Indian films, Indian books, Indian culture, Indian foods, Indian everything else in Thailand as well. And I would love to see a greater two-way traffic. And I'm sure that if you chaps would like to bring your your dual identities to India, have more authentic Thai products and Thai restaurants and Thai everything else available in India too, the traffic can be two ways. And I think we'd be very, very welcoming of it, because it'll be a reminder of all that we had in common for centuries, even millennia, that we have allowed ourselves to lose sight of during the colonial period, our colonial period, and your more recent past. So I think we should now revive something which needs reviving.
That is all from me. Thank you, Dr. Tharoor. Thank you, Mr. Agaskar. I've been Shivansh Mishra from IndoThaiNews. Thank you for joining us.
All the best.
Thank you, Dr. Tharoor. Thank you for your time.
Nice, isn't it?
And being over here and answering all the questions over here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That.
Subscribe to IndoThaiNews for more such content, and our socials will be linked in the description, so please do give us a follow.